Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. We're now talking about his 1994 film, True Lies. I love that title. It's just such a fucking cool title, True Lies. I love it. This is a really interesting film in Cameron's filmography. It really stands out amongst all the other ones that he's made, if you don't count Piranha II. It's almost an oddity that you almost wonder, how did Cameron make this one? Why did Cameron make this one? Because it just doesn't seem to really fall in line with all the things that he'd been interested in doing up until that point and far beyond that point as well. But that makes it a really cool entry into his filmography. I'm glad that he made this film. If you ever wondered what a James Cameron spy action extravaganza movie looked like, look no further than True Lies. This was the beginning of Cameron's multi-million-dollar production deal with 20th Century Fox, which then carried over to Titanic and Avatar and beyond, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure the logistics of what's going to happen with the Avatar sequels, because obviously 20th Century Fox has been bought by Disney. They now own that property and the back catalogue, and they've now rebranded it to 20th Century Studios. I don't know if they're actively using that as a production company to release more films, so I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen there, but obviously the Avatar series and franchise is now under the Disney umbrella. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. True Lies, it was a marked change for Cameron, I think, a change of direction. I wonder if this was just something he wanted to do where it's like, you know what, I want to just do something that's really light. Like, Terminator 2 was a hell of a movie to make. Like, it was a very arduous process and, very deep, heavy film thematically and logistically, although True Lies logistically is quite a big movie as well. But it's a fun action movie. It's just pure entertainment, and Cameron has always made entertaining films, but I think this is the most purely entertainment driven film that he's made. There's no real big theme to this film, I don't think. You look at Terminator 2 and there are themes there of fatherhood and of finding guidance in parental figures who aren't your blood, which obviously is quite a weird one with the fact that John Connor is finding a father figure in an android, a robot, whatever you want to call it, but also these deep themes of humanity and the self-destructive nature of man. There's a lot of deep themes in Terminator 2 and a lot of deep themes, I think, in The Abyss, and certainly in Aliens, motherhood, and in the Terminator, just these themes of fate and the future. And then, Titanic, there's heavy themes of love and also fate, but also, these, again, actually the kind of the follies of man, building this huge ship and it's unsinkable and it sinks. And it's kind of, one of they take on kind of like parable, qualities, some of his films, when you look at the larger themes at play. True Lies, it's just an action movie. It's a fun action movie. There's not too much else going on. This was the first film that he co-produced with 20th Century Fox, as well as his own production company, Lightstorm Entertainment, which he founded in 1990, which I believe was also responsible for co-producing Terminator 2. But now he was partner up with 20th Century Fox, and again moving forward to Titanic and Avatar and beyond. And he also had founded a digital visual effects company called Digital Domain, and this was True Lies was the first major production that Digital Domain had worked on. So, he was really kind of getting all the chips on the table at this point, I think, moving forward. And at this time, I guess he was also thinking about Avatar. And Titanic, I think, came a little bit after True Lies, I think, when he first went down to visit the ship. More on that later. But True Lies, for me personally, is a film that I grew up on, and it was similar to films I really loved at the time, like Mission Impossible, GoldenEye, both spy movies, didn't even think about that, but just the kind of the current action movies that I was really enjoying as a kid. And, I like spy movies as well, and it's just fun to see Cameron do a spy movie. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, who he reteamed with again after the Terminator and Terminator 2, he plays Harry Tasker, who is a special secret agent. It's kind of a little bit shit. He's not from the FBI, it's the Omega Sector, I think, which is a sect of the intelligence agency of America, I guess. I don't know. And there's a fun cameo from Charlton Heston, who I, as a kid, had no idea who it was. So to me, it was just that old guy in the eye patch who turned up for one scene. And so I hadn't seen this film in about 10 years until I revisited it for this series. And so I was, it was a little bit, it felt new, but at the same time, it's very familiar to me. I've seen it probably dozens of times. But the Charlton Heston thing was like, oh, cool, Charlton Heston. I didn't even realize he was in this. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him. And then he never turned up. He might be in 2 scenes, I think, but he's barely in the movie overall in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, it was nice to revisit this after 10 years. But I will say this is probably the least I've enjoyed it. Maybe. It's different. It really is. And I do think that it's Cameron's weakest film. But it's also his freest film. He's just having fun here. And therein lies part of the problem when it comes to how this film is available or not available on home video these days. So towards the end of the video, I will talk about the fact that I have a Blu-ray on my shelf when the film hasn't been given an official Blu-ray release. More on that later. So Harry Tasker, he works for the Omega Sector, and we have a fun action scene to open the movie. He comes home after his trip, and we realize that his wife Helen, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, has no idea that he's a spy. She's oblivious. She thinks he's a computer salesman, I think. Completely kind of boring job that, he has these things, I guess, rehearsed where he tells her about all of the stuff that he's seen at the convention that he's been, the convention that he's gone to over the weekend. And, he just recites all this kind of just jargon, technical stuff, and she just falls right asleep. So she's not that interested in what he does for a living and thinks he's a fairly ordinary, boring man who she loves. But, you don't get the sense that Helen feels in any way, shape or form that her husband is a secret agent. Like, it's the possibility has probably never entered her mind. And as the film progresses, Harry's working on, this whole plot with a terrorist played by Art Malik called Aziz, I think, and he's kind of partnered up with a woman played by Tia Carrera, Juno. And, there's like these weapons and stuff. It's not really all that important what the actual, I can't even remember what the goal of those terrorists was, really. It's more about the paths kind of crossing of Harry and these terrorists and him getting kind of wrapped into this greater plot. And this is actually based on a complete remake, apparently, of a French film, which I never known until I started looking up the very scant behind-the-scenes information on this film. There isn't any big making-of documentary or anything like that, but it's based on a French film called La Totale, and it's kind of it's a comedy action movie, and they took that plot, which is of a man who's a special secret agent. I keep saying special secret agent. He's a secret agent, and his wife doesn't know. And then she gets drawn into it, and she has to become a secret agent. So that's the plot of the film, basically, where Helen, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, she gets caught in a situation where Harry thinks that she's cheating on him, which he isn't. And, he realizes that she's telling the truth and everything. They interrogate her. So it's a really great scene, that interrogation scene. And in general, Jamie Lee Curtis is fantastic in this film. I think she won a Golden Globe for this one, and well deserved, I think. She's just really great, really funny. She's got great comedic timing, but she really sells the serious moments as well. And that interrogation scene when Harry's just like grilling her with like a distorted voice over whether she's been faithful to her husband, and she really, lays down the law and says, I would never cheat on my husband. And he realizes she's telling the truth, and he finds a way to kind of reconcile with her in a way. And he basically says, you're going to be a secret agent. We're going to give you a mission to do. And this is all off the books. Like, he's not really supposed to do this. And he has his friend in the Omega Sector, played by Tom Arnold, who's a pretty good comedic, side character relief in the film, I think, overall. And so he makes a lot of this stuff happen. And they have a meeting, where Harry goes in and is in the shadows in his hotel room, and his wife comes in, and he's going to reveal it in a very romantic way, but it is kind of sketchy what he does, to be fair. But it's a comedy. You don't take those things too seriously. But then the actual terrorists arrive, and they get captured, and now it's like you know, it's a much more serious situation, and all the general big massive action set pieces you can imagine in an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. But then you add James Cameron in, who has a kind of a real keen eye and a specialty in these big action set pieces. Then some big stuff happens in the final act of the film. But it's mainly, I don't know, I'd say there's a healthy balance of the big action scenes and the interpersonal relationship between Harry and Helen, and you know, they're both, you know, kind of leading these double lives in a way. And I have to say, Bill Paxton, who plays this sleazy, literally used car salesman who meets Helen randomly, and he tells her he's a secret agent. And the joke, of course, is that he isn't at all, but her real husband is. And so there's a really satisfying scene at the end of that character's kind of shelf life in the movie, when Harry just completely humiliates and literally makes Bill Paxton piss his pants in fear, which is a very satisfying scene because he's such a slimy character. But he kind of lures Helen into his fake story about how he's a secret agent, and she is clearly wanting some excitement in her life, and that's kind of an interesting element of Harry and Helen's relationship, where she is stuck in this boring job, and you know, her husband is away all the time, and whenever he's home, he just wants to be that boring dad and husband. But because he's being, you know, this is literally, we're talking about like the security and the safety of the American public. He has to work a lot. He can't just, you know, take, you know, a week off or whatever. He needs to kind of almost be at the beck and call of the Omega sector. So, you know, he wants to just be a normal, boring guy when he's at home, and she kind of wants more than just boring, and so she kind of gets drawn into Bill Paxton's lies, and that's where it all kind of explodes for Harry and Helen towards the middle of the movie. Now, I have to say, I'd be remiss to not mention this story, because I think that when you thoroughly embarrass yourself, sometimes it's worth telling the story, because the story's just, it's worth telling, I think. So, there's a line in the film when Harry goes out and he meets Bill Paxton. I think the guy's name, but he meets the sleazy used car salesman, and Harry goes for a spin in one of these cars with Bill Paxton next to him, and he knows that this guy, or he thinks that this guy is sleeping with his wife Helen, and he's kind of, and that's another really fun part of the movie, is when he's just like he's tracking his wife, you know, and Tom Arnold's like, you can't really be doing this. He's like, we're doing this, like we're gonna find out if she's cheating on me, and then I love how it's like, the most of the movie is about this big terrorist plot, you know, like really heavy stuff, and then just takes like a side journey for a little bit where it's all just about his wife and whether she's cheating on him, and you know that she isn't, but he doesn't, so it's really fun for the audience, I think, in that way. But he's in the car with Bill Paxton, and Bill Paxton saying, oh yeah, I always just like, I tell the women what they want to hear, and he's revealing his whole kind of shtick. And he's just like, oh, there's one woman I got lined up, you ought to see. And he's basically talking about his wife right in front of him. And Arnold's driving the car like, oh, yeah. And he said, I'm trying to remember the lead into it, but Bill Paxton says something along the lines of, she's got a pair of titties that make you want to get down and beg for buttermilk or something like that. And then the line at the end is like, ass like a 10-year-old boy. And then that's the very memorable moment to me where Arnold just punches him straight in the face, and his head flies back, there's blood everywhere, and then it cuts and you realize he hasn't punched him, and Bill Paxton still sat there laughing like a dickhead. But it's really funny cuts in the film. But I had always thought when I was a kid, what the fuck, ass like a 10-year-old boy, what does that mean? And now I'm watching it as a proper adult, I feel, and I'm going, ass like a 10, what the fuck does that mean? So I go on Google, and I type in, what does ass like a 10-year-old boy mean? Because I'm thinking, is there like some sort of like hidden meaning I'm not getting? Is there some weird, twisted way in which this actually makes sense that a normal man would find attractive in a woman? And I typed into Google without really thinking, and I hit enter. I would give you some advice right now. Never type into Google ass like a 10-year-old boy. Instantly, an alert popped up on my screen warning me about child pornography. I'll let that sink in for a minute and take a sip of water. I started just shitting myself, panicking, and I still think I'm being watched for this. Now, to be fair, the warning that came up was actually warning me about, you know, be vigilant online if you see anything, basically. But as soon as I saw that warning about, I absolutely, like, my stomach dropped. But I will say, in my defense, the only results that I saw on Google were like posts on Reddit saying, why does Bill Paxton say ass like a 10-year-old boy? So no one seems to know what the fuck this means, and it's a really weird line of dialogue, so I don't know. It's a weird one, and for the purposes of not raising any red flags with the government, I'm not going to pursue that kind of that answer any more thoroughly than just typing into Google, which seems like enough to, cause concern. So anyway, I couldn't not mention that because holy shit. So it's a fun movie, and I don't know what about it didn't really hold up as much. I guess it's just the fact that I like my James Cameron movies with a bit of weight behind them, and it's a fun movie, it's really enjoyable. I'll tell you one thing, seeing it in high definition certainly distracted me a little bit because you're now seeing a lot of the stunt doubles, and there's like a shot towards the beginning in Switzerland, I think is where it's set, the opening set piece of the film. Arnold is running down these there's this snowy hilltop, and you can tell it's not him, and it's like really not him. And this happens in movies, it is what it is. And even Connie was like, why couldn't he just run down a snowy hill? And it wasn't like a steep one or anything. It seemed like a strange thing to get a stuntman to do, but it is what it is. And then later on, you see him on horseback riding through the city, which is a great chase sequence through the city and into a hotel and up to the top of the roof. Really great horse versus motorcycle chase sequence. But he's riding the horse at pace. So I'm thinking, okay, he can ride a horse fast. And I don't know how you would make that safe. I mean, it's not like they're on a track or being carried by a car. The horse is very clearly galloping. It's a very clearly a real horse. So I don't know why running down the hill was. It might have just been a scheduling thing. I don't know. But the stunt doubles are very obvious in this film, which they certainly weren't in the VHS days. And even the stunt double for Art Malik in the motorcycle chase through the hotel. I mean, the color of his skin is a very specific color, and it's very clearly just a mask on probably a white stuntman, and it's got the whole headpiece, and it doesn't look great, So it's very distracting. But I can't say that honestly, took away from my enjoyment of the movie. It was something as very minor as obvious stunt doubles, but I don't know. I guess just it's fun. It's an entertaining ride, but there isn't much more beyond that. It reminds me of being a kid again and enjoying that film a lot. But it's I don't know. It's definitely a film I love and really enjoy, and will watch again in the future. But it didn't quite carry the extra something. Revisiting Cameron's films for this series, which to begin with was a complete. I think I've talked about it before because I'm filming all of these out of order, but it was very much just Connie saying, I want to watch Titanic again, and me going, oh god, okay, and we watched it, and I just thought, wow, I've never loved Titanic more than I do right now. Then we watched the Terminator, and I'm like, I've never loved this more. And same with Terminator 2, and so I just feel like an Avatar, even seeing that film again for this series made me love it more than I ever have before. So I was kind of hoping it would be like the full set. I'd see True Lies and be like, wow, I've never enjoyed that as much. But it wasn't. It was just, it's not a knock on the film. It just it's a bit light. That's its strength, though. I think that's its strength as a movie, is that it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's probably one of the main reasons that that Cameron is not too keen on the film being released again anymore. Apparently, I mean, there's rumors, and that's the thing. So we'll talk now a little bit about the actual home video history of this film. It obviously came on VHS and DVD, but Blu-ray, it never seemed to happen, and we're now I think we're in the 15th year, 2021, we're in the 15th year of Blu-ray's lifespan. I believe the first Blu-ray disc started rolling out in 2006. Still no True Lies, still no The Abyss. And we've talked about The Abyss in a previous video, but, True Lies is the one that Cameron has said that, it's in a post 9/11 world, it's tricky with this one, and I can understand why, but apparently there were and are, I don't know what the status of these things are at the moment, but there were, Blu-ray transfers ready for The Abyss and True Lies. Now we've seen that there's a 4K, grade and restoration that's been done on The Abyss, and it's been shown on HBO Max. No physical disc release date as of yet. True Lies, there hasn't really been any updates like that, but Cameron has just said that he doesn't have time to look at them, which seems a bit, suspect. But, there's been a lot of controversy about the film from certain people, and even Cameron himself has admitted that in a post 9/11 world, the way that terrorists are dealt with so flippantly in True Lies is not something that, fits with today's world. And again, I can kind of see that. So currently, all that is available is this disc right here. So this is a Spanish Blu-ray. I don't know how you would pronounce the title there, but it does say True Lies at the bottom. And to be fair, it has a number of extras, some interviews, some making of featurettes, and premiere footage and things like that. But this is a Spanish release that is not official. It's a bootleg. But for all intents and purposes, it's a legitimate Blu-ray. The transfer looks really good. It's not great. It feels like a late 2000s Blu-ray transfer. And you can buy it from Spain. And Spain seemed to have a weird kind of loophole in their copyright laws where you can just buy bootlegs. I don't know why. I don't know how. So this has clearly been sourced from some kind of high-definition TV, presentation or something and slapped on a disc. And they can somehow get away with it. They call it grey release. I don't know if that's because it literally is a moral grey area. But for me, I've waited this long. And if an official release happens, I'll buy it in an instant. So it's just one of those things where I don't feel too bad about buying a bootleg. But I wanted to see this film in high definition, for this series. I felt like it needed that extra jumping quality for me to watch and enjoy the film and give my honest thoughts on it. But yeah, it looks good. Doesn't look amazing. It certainly could be better. But, talking about the sensitivity of the terrorist plot and everything like that, I will say, moving now into some talk about the possible sequel for True Lies, which I'd never really heard about, again, until researching this for the video. There was going to be a True Lies 2. Even in 1997, just a few years after this film came out, Cameron had a meeting with Jamie Lee Curtis and Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, it might have been with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold. And he later also met with Jamie Lee Curtis. I think even Eliza Dushku, who plays Helen and Harry's daughter in the film. She's a very minor role. I seem to remember being in it more, but she wasn't. That's another thing. I'll try not to get too much off track here, but you don't really feel too much in the way of stakes in this film. Like, his daughter gets kidnapped towards the end, and I never really feel like she's in peril because it's a light, bouncy action comedy, Whereas even in a film like Aliens that I've seen 100 times, when Newt gets taken by the alien, I get so stressed out, even though I know that she's fine by the end of the movie and will eventually go on to be killed unceremoniously off screen in the beginning of Alien 3. But regardless, I don't feel the stakes in True Lies that much, which again is fine for the kind of movie that it is, but that probably goes some way into why I think it's his weakest film and also probably my least favorite now, I will say. Anyway, where was I? The sequel. So he had a meeting with Arnold and with Tom Arnold about coming back for a True Lies 2. And Cameron met with a writer, and he wasn't sure whether he was going to direct the film, but he was saying, it's going to happen, we're going to do a sequel. He made Titanic, and then 98, 99, and discussions kept going. And apparently Cameron did work on the story with a screenwriter for about a year and a half. And then 2000 hits, and it was okay, we're going to look at it next year. And then I think even Jamie Lee Curtis was signed on for it, and or at least I don't know if it was like a handshake basis, but everyone was ready to go to do this, and they were really happy with where this second film was going. And then 9/11 happened, and even in 2001, Arnold said that we're going to film it next year, and it's a really good script. We're looking forward to it. But then as time passed, it was like, we probably shouldn't go ahead with this, or at least make some changes. There was apparently a scene set on a plane where there's a fight scene going on in a plane, the plane's going down, and Schwarzenegger was like, look, it's not similar to 9/11, but just the fact that it's in a plane, it's a very set, and there is a terrorist plot, it's a bit sensitive, and we need to change some things. 2003 rolls around. Now Arnold is going to be the governor of California, or that's what he's running for. His acting career is winding down in terms of moving into politics. And so it was like, well, we'll do it after that. But, time passed, and still that sensitivity remained. And Jamie Lee Curtis eventually said that, we're never going to make this film again. It's, terrorism isn't funny. And not that it was in when we first made True Lies, but it was, and I think the quote from Jamie Lee Curtis is that she felt like the terrorists in general were not as much of the forefront of the American psyche as they were in 2001 when the attack on the World Trade Center happened. And I understand that. It's not like terrorists or terrorism didn't exist before 9/11. But that attack was monumental. It was huge. And so just from a public PR standpoint, making a movie about terrorists and kind of treating them flippantly as they did in the first film in True Lies, it would have been a bad look, I think, and would have felt grimy just to do and just to make, I think. So I understand that. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with taking the piss out of terrorists. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I can understand. And it's, if that's why Cameron doesn't want to get the film released on Blu-ray properly, again, I understand it. I don't agree with it. I think it's a product of its time in that sense. And I don't certainly find anything offensive, in the film. But, they are treated as jokes. And I think that's kind of the right way to go about it. And, by the end of the film, when Art Malik Aziz is on the the missile on Arnold's kind of fighter jet, and he's just like, "You're fired." And he launches him through a building into the helicopter, blowing up all the. It's just like it's a Looney Tunes cartoon. You can't really take that film seriously, but it's a damn good time, And there's a part in the film where it's almost like Cameron's trying to justify it, where Jamie Lee Curtis has been confronted with the fact that her husband Harry is a spy. And Helen says, "Have you killed people?" And and Arnold's like, "Yes, but they were all bad." It's almost like Cameron going, "Okay, so we're killing people in the film, but it's okay because they're bad people, And if we're looking at this as a kind of realistic, gritty, action movie, it doesn't quite fly. But it's. Yeah, you just take it with a pinch of salt, There's a really funny moment that I'd forgotten about where Tom Arnold is in the street, I think during that chase sequence with the motorbike, and I think Art Malik is firing towards him, or someone's firing towards him, and Tom Arnold hides behind this lamppost, which, he's a fairly sizable guy, and he's just like, and all of the bullets hit the lamppost, and he's like, oof. I love stuff, it's cartoony, and it is Cameron at his most light and bouncy and fun, and there's something just enjoyable about that. So I do have a lot of time for True Lies, but nowhere near enough as I do have time for all of his other major films, I think, not counting, of course, Piranha 2. So yeah, True Lies. It's fun to go back to this film. And I could probably talk more about some of the finer details. The score, is pretty good. It feels suited kind of an adventure kind of spy movie. And Brad Fiedel returned after working on the first Terminator and Terminator 2. And even there's a scene in, I think, the limousine with Tia Carrere's character Juno and Helen, and they're fighting in the limousine on that bridge in Florida. And the score suddenly starts to turn very Terminator 2 T-1000-esque with some very metallic, sharp-sounding sounds. Sharp-sounding sounds, that's the only way I can describe it. I'm not very musical. And I was like, oh, it sounds like the T-1000's theme, like a very sharp kind of, I don't know, that kind of really stood out to me when I was watching the film. But otherwise, it's a very rousing kind of fun, it's just a fun movie. It really is a fun movie. There's lots of memorable moments and scenes, and Bill Paxton's slimy but hilarious, and Jamie Lee. How could I not talk about Jamie Lee Curtis and this film in general without talking about the dance scene? So 1994. I was I'd probably be about 7, 8 years old when I first watched this. You could almost call this like a a sexual awakening of some form. I do think that there's a couple of first moments in films where I remember feeling like, I there's something different about the way I feel about what I'm seeing on the screen right now. True Lies certainly wasn't the first of those films, but there was another Arnold Schwarzenegger film actually with Sharon Stone, Total Recall. That was a film that really, when I was a kid, perked me up. And but anyway, with True Lies, I mean, it's a very sexy scene when she dances, and yeah, I mean, it still has that hot factor, and it's a very seductive scene, but it's also a funny scene. It starts out and she's dancing for him and stuff, and it's funny that he's there, and you're kind of like on edge that she's going to find out that her husband is sitting right in front of him, and he's kind of playing the wrong things on the. I think, is it a French guy who does the recording of the voice, like, dance slower and all that kind of stuff. And then she's getting into it, and the music is playing, and then she falls over. And Arnold's like, oh my god. Like, it's a fun scene, but it also has that kind of really hot, steamy element to it. And I think that, and anyone who's interested in women, man or woman, watching that and not finding some sort of arousal, probably, there's probably something wrong there, because it's a pretty damn hot scene. Anyway. And it's so it has these very interesting, like, there's really funny scenes, there's a really sexy scene, there's some really big, fun action sequences with lots of guns and bullets flying and explosions, and Arnold diving into the water, and the horse on top of the roof, and the motorbike flying off the roof into the pool on the other side on a different building, which is so utterly ridiculous, but you kind of go along with it because you just do. And then the whole kind of final sequence with the fighter jet, and yeah, it's It's just got a lot of variety, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very entertaining film. Not much more to say, I think, but I'm kind of glad a sequel didn't happen. I don't think the film needed it. I think it's just fine as it is. And as far as Cameron's entire filmography is concerned, it does stand out. It's just this. It just seems like he thought, oh, just take a breather. I mean, it's a huge film to make. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he breezed through this, I'm sure, but just thematically, I don't know. It just seemed like it was probably a really fun movie to make, and just have fun with it. You know, again, fun is the word that springs to mind when I think about True Lies. It's fun to watch. It's probably fun to make. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit more of a logistical nightmare in terms of some of those set pieces and stuff. But it's it's cool to see what he could do with. I mean, it's probably his most comedic film as well, and I think he handled it really well as a director, as a writer. So yeah, I think that it's nice that he did something like this and kind of stretched himself out a little bit. Even though, again, I think it's I don't know. I don't know if it'd be an easier film to make than one of the heavier sci-fi driven movies like Terminator 2 or Aliens or even The Abyss, where there's a lot more emphasis on drama and being funny, can sometimes be more difficult than being serious, I think. But yeah, it's a cool film, and a unique one in his filmography. As I've already said, I'm repeating myself at this point, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.